United States Department of Agriculture.
Next up is Baer from Michigan State University, who's going to talk about his experience with the Kellogg Biological Station long-term ecological research. There, I think you should be set up now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I should thank Sven Baum, who's the data expert, he's in charge of data repository at KBS. So he did a lot of the background work to help make this work correctly. So the experiment we're looking at is the main line LTER, long-term ecological research station research project. So we have 35 plots. There's 7 treatments and 5 replicants per treatment. I was assuming when I started this project, I would basically end up with just the 7 treatments being treated separately. But it turns out that over 35, this experiment was over 35. I was like 34 years old. It turns out that every plot is a little bit different. Sometimes there were insects in one plot, they had to apply pesticides. Sometimes someone irrigated, sometimes they harvested different plots on different days because it started to rain or something. So I ended up creating 35 separate plots for this that we should add some a little more hurdle on the way to process this data. So I said the main experiment started in 1988 and continues today. So there's new data being collected every day. New data is entered in the database, gets updated daily, if not weekly. Inside, we call this one experiment. It's actually many experiments. People who are very interested in having access to this well-documented field sites. People come in and do maybe some just in gas, in nitrates or something. They'll come in for a year or two, they'll sample gases, or they'll come in and collect data at different times. And there's occasionally we'll record soil data. So there's a large number of experiments going on, which means different scientists, different data collectors, and because it's an ecological experiment, different disciplines, agronomists, soil scientists, ecologists. And then again, these experiments are collected on also different time scale. I mean, there are people, again, I'm sort of focused on this gas collection, this thing we're working on in our group. And people will put a chamber there and we'll measure gas collection for a week or two continuously. And again, on the far end, people can't be coring this research plot frequently because it just obviously disturbs the soil. So maybe there might be 1 or 2 soil cores over the course of 30 years. So there's a different time frame. So the data is collected on vastly different time scales. And then some of the data is collected automatically. Obviously, the weather station is automatic. There are other sampling devices that are automatic. But a lot of the data in the database is basically I think a lot of this work was not for the database originally. I think a lot of it started as paper records and was digitized later on. So it's again, the way the data gets to the database is different. So all that data means that the database is a pretty I want to say it's a database. They have they've always had someone maintain the database, but it turns out that a lot of stuff gets put in there with no thought of how you retrieve the data later on, especially how you retrieve it for prompt modeling. So I think there are literally hundreds of different data tables on this database. Some of them are very small. There's maybe 5 measurements of something. A lot of this data that for our prompt modeling, as Lori said, there's lots of messages, there's lots of stuff about animals, not only insects but mammals and so forth that we simply are not interested in for prompt modeling at this point. So one of our first tasks was to go through and find which tables we wanted. We sort of I worked with Sven, we kind of ended up finally choosing 16 of the most relevant data tables for art. I think there's a few more that might someday be able to harvest data from it doesn't deal with soils. Soil data it needs cleanup work, and I think a few of those might be available, in a few years, this year, a few years time. And then our goal is to take these 16 data sets and to publish those as a data set on EDI, the repository, environmental data initiative data repository. So we've done a few. We have a subset of the 16 of those of these 16 tables there now. I'm hoping in a few days we'll get that final data set published as DOI on there, so that we can then the Ag National Library can connect to that and have a good point for that. And then every year, I don't think it's a regular schedule, but roughly every year, KBS updates your data set on EDI, and because they have a very good system of automating their data sets, when they update the regular data sets, the ARDN data set, the modeling data set will be updated at the same time and be uploaded to EDI at the same time. So I think a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff is very similar to what Lori said. There is. I said a lot of data is quantitative. A lot of stuff says Joe went out to the field and he planted corn and he put down he used some device and so some that's been audited. Some of that people have gone through and have annotated that to have useful numbers. Some are not. Like you have soil depths. This is the shell being deep. I asked several times, and someone said, someone knows, but no one really. I could never find out what that meant. Which meant some of that data we lost some of that data. There's no way for us to put that into a modeling data set. You need to have a top depth, bottom depth. So some data which is very useful is not amenable to the modeling. It's not as status it is now. Obviously, there's unit problems. It's amazing how many different kind of units people do for the same kind of data. Soil moisture, so also soils particularly seems to be there's different ways people think about soils, and they may use different units for that. And then again, I would say, sorry, we have lots of words that we have the problem where we have a single column might have different units because, for instance, in planting, there might be one column that says we planted corn. Okay, that's one. Then it said, then we planted 6 bushels per acre. And then the next, so one column will say bushels per acre, the next column will say 6. And then the next line will say pounds per acre, and that will be 3. Well, that means that one column actually has multiple units. So that was really messy in terms of these columns. And so that's the example. And then there's also problems not uniform labeling. Again, because eventually I want to have identified plots. In the database, sometimes they say the column's called treatment. Sometimes it's treatment number 1. This is treatment 1. Sometimes it's called T1. And while this is really trivial as a human being, it makes perfect sense. The computer, those are 2 different things. So I work with Sven to end up creating these custom data tables or adding specific columns to existing tables. And again, some of the stuff is just be sure that all these units have the same nomenclature. Again, we had to break up as a large activity table where line 1 says we planted, line 2 said we harvested, line 3 said we applied fertilizer. Well, we went ahead and made each of those event types into its own table, which made it much easier to then rationalize the column. So have rational columns with the right units. And we even added a little conversion program to convert like bushels per acres and pounds per acres for seeds into seeds per hectare. We thought that would be useful for us to do that versus making the model users do that on their end. We had quite a bit of debate on that, but I thought it would be useful to have us as experts make that conversion versus force the models to do that. And again, then obviously for weather to daily values, they have a much finer scale weather data. Let's see what's next here. Then they obviously these would, and so we put the correct units, we put these new tables, columns, and so then that means that when these tables now are designed, they're part of the KBS system. They're known, they're recorded in their own data set, and therefore they'll now carrying on all the data entering the system will be handled and converted correctly and moved on to when it gets published in EDI. So again, we similar thing on the mapper. We have column names to the CASA names. CASA converted to the units to the correct units. Again, I had originally thought we were going to have treatment as one thing. We basically go ahead and combine the treatment name and the replicate name to get a unique identifier for each plot. I think they actually have plot identifiers at KBS, but the databases they were not consistent across databases at all. So we ended up saying we ended up creating our own plot nomenclature. We then use it to link. We use that. Then we use a unique identifier to link the treatments across all the databases, all the data tables. Then we use a VMapper to create the sidecar too, as described by Lori. So we're a little further behind than we should be on this. We're close. I guess I always feel like we're almost there, but we never quite get there. So we need to I assume these databases these details are not perfect, so we need to probably do one more clean up on those. Although I think they're good enough now. And then have get the data set complete and publish that to EDI. And then we'll have to edit sidecar 2. Right now, sidecar 2 doesn't know where that permanent listing is. We need to do one more edit on sidecar 2 to point to the new EDI data set, add the entries on aggregated commons, and then submit that for approval for aggregated commons. So this stuff should be relatively straightforward. I think we're close, but not quite where we would like to be on that. So that's my quick and dirty. So, if there's questions or comments.
All right, thanks, Brian. Any questions for Brian?
Oh, we have a question from Nicole. Go ahead, Nicole.
Hi. Yeah, this is cool. I'm familiar with the Kellogg LTER and EDI, and I was just wondering if you had considered publishing or linking somehow the ARDNized data product in EDI, so that if I realize EDI is going to have the original data, and then that'll be harvested by Ag Data Commons. But will anybody in EDI know that there's an ARDNized data product out there? I was just wondering about that.
It's a good question. I'm sorry Sven's not here. Sven's obviously more of a, Sven says is definitely worked with EDI much more close than I have. I don't know. The next question, I don't know. We haven't talked about a mechanism to do that. So that's a good point. I guess we'd have to, I don't know whether that could be added to metadata and EDI and how, even if we did with that, whether people would know to look for it. That's a good question. I'll talk to Sven and see if he has a suggestion on that. You're right, absolutely right. You do want people to know that if modelers stumble across it, or not someone, if searching EDI they find a data set and your modeler, it'd be very useful for you to know this. Oh yeah, this is really useful derivative of that. You can, that's a good point. I'll have to talk to Sven.
Yeah, the other challenge with this data set is that it's continually updated. They're always collecting new data. So every year it's updated on EDI and a new version needs to be linked on Ag Data Commons. So that was one of the things that we talked through, the protocols for how you continually update data.
Right, I think so. The Ag Data Commons has a data harvester, and we worked out some protocols. I guess we need to be sure that's all finalized again. We should be sure that then when the new data set appears, the Ag Data Commons automatically knows about that and can harvest that and update their link as well. So I think Any comment, I think we've got a pretty good idea how to do that, but not so much on the EDI end, not so much on the EDI end.
Right. I think it also becomes, it really is what's the source of what data, because you don't want to end up getting circular references that never actually point anywhere. If this points to their aggregated columns, which push you back to EDI and which one, who owns what. It's just, how do we keep that referential integrity?
Right, but I think the thing about, I think we trust you is that the data set EDI will be kind of the official data set, because there's a KBS hasn't, this data is available at KBS's data, on their database as well, and that, that's, and that's continuous. So there is, but I think their goal is to keep people, to point people away from the KBS, but to point to this official repository. This is like the official repository data.
Right. And that actually brings up a kind of common concern or common discussion point of where, if this is truly just pointers to other repositories, it's really up to the data provider where they want to put their data and how they get that references back to their original data or back to ARDN data, and where do they store that. So it really all does reside on the data provider, but there should be common practices that we can establish as a community. So just something to think of as we have discussions throughout the day.
So, and just to confirm, in this case, EDI is issuing the DOI, and the DOI changes, I think, slightly with each update on your annual basis. And then that DOI is maintained by Ag Data Commons. They're not issuing another DOI. So it'll always go back to that primary repository, which is EDI. Is that correct?
That's correct. The DOI will definitely reside at EDI. I'm not sure, we had a discussion, I'm not sure whether the sidecar 2 file will get a DOI or not. I guess I'm not sure what we decide on that.
It's up to the data provider or the people. My view of it is, again, as always, like, no, don't do it. It makes sense.
Well, no, ours didn't, but yes.
Right. My view of it is if you're publishing derivative data, put a DOI on it. If you're not publishing it, leave yourself some flexibility to modify it if you do end up publishing it. So once it becomes published, it becomes, it needs to be stable.
Right.
So even if you never publish the middle and you publish the outputs, like the derivative of the ARDN products, which would be model inputs or other inputs, that can have a DOI. The middle piece doesn't necessarily have to have one. So, you do want to keep the chain clean. So maybe you would publish every step in between the original data source, the ARDNized products, and the outputs from the ARDNized products. So again, that's a provider question. It's a provider issue.
But your calls, I'm sorry, I started wandering off there. But but for sure, certainly the data itself will have a DOI on EDI, where the data resides.
All right, any more questions?
Thanks.
Thank you, Brian.
USDA is an equal opportunity provider, employer, and lender.